The SEC and the Big Ten are trying to keep you out of the college football playoff. And it's about time we stand up for ourselves. Let's get locked on Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up there, Bears fans? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas, alongside, as we do every Wednesday, Sydney Wicker on a Wicker Wednesday from Channel 6 Sports. We are talking about this new college football proposed expansion and how these conferences have really backed us all into a corner, how un-American that is. We'll also hear from Scott Drew and North Chatham-Mere and their takeaways from the Arizona loss and what this means kind of bigger picture for Baylor men's basketball. And switching to the women's side, is Nikki Collin going to have some big-time hardware at the end of the season? All that and more coming up on this episode of Locked On Baylor. Sydney, the report comes out, Ross Dellenger talking about expanded college football playoff, and it's what we kind of expect, but everything we hate. There's talks of going to 14 or 16 teams, and by the way, we're going to expand the playoffs. Just not for you guys. It's going to be for the SEC and the Big Ten, two conferences you're very familiar with, both, watching a ton of and covering a couple of different times. So what were your initial thoughts on this? It can't be surprising the power that these two conferences are wielding, but this is where somebody's got to draw a line.
Yeah, I was going to say not surprising, but kind of just like, okay, what more are we going to do here? Like, this is getting a little ridiculous. I remember when I was covering Mississippi State, there was a press conference we did with Coach Mike Leach, and he was like, well, I drew up a way that we could do a 64-team expansion if we really wanted to, and then you'd have March Madness of football going on, which is just crazy. So it's not the most insane thing I've ever heard in my life, but at what point, like you said, do you draw the line? Do you stop? I mean, how many SEC teams could have been in this year if Alabama was better? I know that was a conversation. Does Alabama get in or not? And then, the Big Ten, they had 3 teams in this year. Is that not enough? I mean, one of them went on to win the title. I don't like to say who for my own personal standpoint. We'll put a little asterisk on there, but
name redacted. Yeah.
Just why? What more do we have to do this for? And why?
This was my biggest fear going into just the expanded playoff. Like 4 never seemed like enough. And like on paper, 12 was great. But I had this feeling, I said it on the show, of like, it feels like that's just going to open up more opportunities for SEC Big Ten schools rather than, oh man, what if Liberty was in here a couple of years ago? Like, I just don't think that's what it was going to pave the way for. And you're kind of right. Like, I think the committee probably got the the group of 5 team right this year. I don't think there was anyone outside of Boise State that really put up a good playoff case, but in some years there are. In some years there are 2 teams that should be making that case and be in. I do want to take from the Dellenger report here from Yahoo Sports to kind of give you exactly what we're talking about here. So this is a couple paragraphs, so I got to really put my reading glasses on and put it to the test here, Sydney.
Want to borrow mine?
Huh? Yeah, please. This is flashbacks to just reading out loud in class. Last spring, during intense and at times heated negotiations over the future of the CFP, leaders of the Big Ten and SEC threatened to create their own postseason system if they were not granted a majority of the CFP revenue and full authority over the playoff format. So in the end, executives of the 10 FBS leagues and Notre Dame signed a memorandum of understanding, handing control over to college football's 2 richest conferences. And soon they are expected to exercise that control. Within the SEC and the Big Ten, momentum is building to further expand the playoff to 14 or 16 teams, assign multiple automatic qualifiers per league, as many as 4 each for themselves, and finalize a scheduling arrangement together that may fetch millions in additional revenue from TV partners, sources told Yahoo Sports. I mean, this is playing out like a mafia movie. Like, this is like the offer you can't refuse. Luca Brasi is saying, hey, it's either your signature on the page or your guts. Like, you got to do this. We'll give you the allure of the 12-team playoff and anyone can get in there. But next year, no. It's going to be more of our teams in there, which is so funny to me, the bitching that they went through with Alabama and Ole Miss this year about them not getting in, knowing that next year they'll just automatically get in. This, to me, I know we say this a ton, Sydney, of like, oh, this isn't the college football I grew up with. And it's not. It's not. The game's constantly evolving and everything. But this ultimately is exactly what we were trying to avoid with any kind of college football playoff. And here 10 years later, to me, it's the worst of both worlds here.
When I first read it, and I know you sent me a segment of Josh Pate talking about this, I paused and I was like, so why do we have a college football playoff committee?
That's a great question.
What are they doing at this point? Because you might as well just let the Big Ten and the SEC talk for themselves, because that's what you're doing on paper. So it really makes no sense. I have listened to the Alabama fans myself in Tuscaloosa talk about these situations. I've been in Tallahassee where they had to watch their dreams of going to the college football playoffs just explode. I think as a fan, the biggest thing we want is consistency within that, because you're either picking the best teams or you're picking the ones that are most deserving. Do you want best teams or do you want most deserving? You have to make that decision, because it doesn't matter if it's 12 teams. It doesn't matter if it's 14 or 16. Who are the best teams getting in? Because now you're just giving free passes to at least 4 of them. Do they really deserve to be in? I am a huge Michigan fan. If you're saying that they were able to get in this last season because they beat Ohio State, I don't think we would have gone very far. We weren't that team this year, and that happens. Yeah. Yes, and I don't know. It doesn't make sense. I think it's ridiculous. I think even when we had the 4 teams, that those were the teams that were supposed to win that year. I don't think there was ever a time where we were like really shocked by that. And look at how many times there's been blow-offs in the championship game alone. Like, that's crazy. Who's tired of watching that? I am. I did not want to watch TCU absolutely get murdered by Georgia.
Well, I enjoyed that, but yeah, the point remains. Yes,
I guess for Baylor fans, they enjoyed it, but still, 60 was like a little much.
Yeah, and the thing that I come back to here, and let me. I've been way into this 4 nations face-off thing, so let me get patriotic. Let me stand on my soapbox here. College football is the great American game. Okay, no one else does it. Literally, like it's ours. Okay, well, Canada, but not nearly the same extent. But you know what I mean. And this ideal is just wholly un-American. Like our nation was founded on a war that fought against this very thing of just placing you there because of where you're from, what family you're from, or what GD patch you wear on your jersey. That is so, and I get it. College football's always been corrupt in some ways. That's not lost on me, but this is just so against what this was for. And the fact that apparently all the conferences knew about this is sad. Like, that's what I come back to after reading this report. It's sad, man. It does feel like you were just backed into a corner here, and now the Big Ten and the SEC will just exercise their power. So I want to ask you this question before we get out of this segment. Do you think in the next few years we're just going to see a different national championship, just a Big Ten SEC national championship and everyone else?
Like 2 separate?
Yeah.
I've been thinking about that since you sent me this article. I hope not, because I think that takes away from it.
I think so too.
Do you want to be the best in the entire nation, or do you want to be one of the best because also Baylor's the best in their championship series or whatever they play? Or, no, you want one winner. That's why football is fun, because one team gets to win. That's why college football is so fun, because they don't have the overtime crap that they have in the NFL where you can
ties. No ties, baby. Yeah. Because this is America. That's what
we don't tie, we win, or we lose.
Yes. You don't tie a war. Well, Vietnam aside. Yes, you don't tie. Okay.
No, it's ridiculous.
And it's really too bad. Like, I can take the NIL stuff, I can take the transfer portal stuff, but once you fundamentally change how we're crowning a champion, it sucks.
I will say, Cam, though, you've asked me before, is there really a bias with the SEC and Big Ten? Of course. Look at it on paper. I know you think I'm
For sure.
crazy sometimes because I back it, but it's true. I've watched
Well,
it.
yeah. Well, like that's the thing though, is like we're not saying like the Big 12 is not as good a football conference as the SEC. I get peeved at how much differently they look at them. But like, of course, and I talked about this with Drake Toll on Locked On Big 12 the other day. The Big 10 is kind of moving in silence. They've got the national champions here. They've got the best teams this year. They absolutely did. And it doesn't feel like they're not, defecating on their neighbor here. Okay. It's not the same way that the SEC is doing it. So yeah, this is the ultimate though. This is the ultimate. And I can't stand for it. I just can't. I also can't stand for kind of how this Baylor basketball season's gone. We're going to talk a little bit about that Arizona game and maybe some of the issues with this team through not only our eyes, but the eyes of Scott Drew and Norchad Omier. That is coming up next on Locked On Baylor. But first, a word from our friends over at Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was dealing with piles of paperwork and frustrating forms, and then waiting and wondering and worrying if you're even going to get any money back. Well, now Taxes is easily uploading your forms to a TurboTax expert who's matched to your unique tax situation. An expert who's backed by the latest technology, which cross-checks millions of data points for 100% accuracy. So while they work on your taxes, you get real-time updates on their progress, and you can get the most money back guaranteed, all while you're just going about your life. No stressing, no worrying, no waiting. Now this is Taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Baylor basketball started the season top 10. Are not going to finish the season top 10. We don't have to worry about the playoff system that they got going on in basketball. Hopefully they don't expand that, actually. That's a story for a different day. But looks like Baylor is going to be in the dance, but kind of just limping in there. Somebody's +1 who they're not actually dating, right? They're just there. They don't know the bride or groom at all. They're just having a good time. And it's been this sequence, Sydney, of I think it's 8 straight games now where they've gone win-loss, win-loss, win-loss. And they lose to Arizona on Monday night, almost Tuesday morning, at the Foster Pavilion. And like there was some effort there for sure, but I just don't know. I don't even know what to say anymore. Like clearly, it's just wild that there's still so much work to be done for this team on February 19th as you're listening to this. Happy birthday to my brother, Matt. I don't know. What was your prevailing feeling? Because you were covering the game on Monday night. What was your prevailing feeling walking out of the Foster Pavilion?
I walked out of there just shaking my head. Like, what did I just watch? Like, Baylor had a chance with, was it 2 or 3 minutes left in the game? I can't remember the exact.
Roughly, yeah, under 4 timeout, yeah.
The final 4 minutes for sure, Baylor was in this game. It was a 4-point game.
Mm-hmm.
And the energy, like, I remember being at the Kansas game, and that place
second half Foster
rocking, so fun. And then sitting there, the same kind of energy from the fans, like it was so late, but that place was so packed and so like my ears hurt from sitting behind the band because it was that loud in there. They usually do because they're very loud, but they're great at their jobs. But the team just did not even look like they wanted to be there.
There seemed like at least a lack of basketball IQ towards the end of that game too.
And it showed in their inability to finish.
Yeah, which they've had problems with before.
Yeah, but you go 22% from 3 again. I mean, you barely beat West Virginia playing like that, but you think you're going to compete with a top 20 team doing that?
And that one particularly frustrating, the Arizona game, because if you just have one day where you're shooting like 35 to 38% from 3, like you beat that team in that game last night. You beat them. West Virginia, same thing. I know they still won, but you could have walked away with that game. Ran away and hid if you just hit 35%. And they used to be able to do that. They can't. Like I'm talking about this year, they were able to do that earlier this year, and now they can't. And we heard from Norchad Omier and Scott Drew after the game, and towards the tail end of this soundbite, I find to be a very interesting quote from Scott Drew. Let's listen in.
I think there was just a little bit more grit. Not enough, though. Like, we came up more aggressive. We did little things different than we did in the first half, and that make we play defense better, but it was not enough. You got to give them credit, too.
We've been a second-half team. I mean, the last 3 games we were down, outscored opponents by, I think, 10 or something in the second half. I know their size. Obviously, without Josh, we really struggle with size. But you can offset that if offensively we can do a better job putting ourselves in position to get some better looks. And we're doing a good job getting the free throw line. 72%. It's not good enough to win a top 25 game. But again, our guys, I thought they competed and gave us a chance second half, and probably maybe they got a little tired, Arizona.
Maybe they got a little tired, Arizona. Maybe that's why we were in the game. I know that might be loaded in there, but I think that's probably a message he's giving to his team after the game of, hey, we got to play 40 here. And Norchad said it too. It's happened quite a few times at home, on the road, on Mars, wherever they want to play. They'll play bad first halves. They'll get it together in the second half. And then it's not enough. But if we're in a position where, oh, yeah, we were in the game because the other team got tired, this team is not going to make it out of round 1. Like, let alone round 2. Like, that's what we're trying to get past the first weekend. Like, that's what bugs me. And I think that's a moment of honesty. I mean, from Scott Drew, not that he's, dishonest with us particularly, but that's like a moment of, yeah, we did some things right, but Arizona really just got tired and kind of let us back in the game. And that, to me, that's a damning statement.
I mean, it's crazy. I didn't realize this till I was looking at the stat sheet after the game. Baylor did outscore Arizona in that second half.
Mm-hmm. And they closed the rebound gap pretty well.
Yes.
Yep.
But I think, I don't know. I was frustrated leaving there because it just seems like Scott, I think he's mad and he's not showing it. But I don't know if the players are that mad about it. You see Norchad, VJ was in that press conference too. It lasted maybe 5 minutes, if that. And the guys were smiling. Maybe it's because they were joking around with each other, or I don't know what they thought was funny. But I remember a couple weeks ago, VJ said a win is mandatory. And in this one, they're kind of just like, oh, well, we lost. Who's next?
It does. I've talked about schedule losses so much on the show, but especially when you hear that, and you in this case seeing that, it's like, yeah, these guys just knew they probably weren't going to win. And like, I know you've dealt with injuries this year, but you were a top 10 team preseason. You brought in 2 great transfers and 2 incredible freshmen. Like, that just shouldn't be the mentality. That this is a loss on our home floor. I like, it just shouldn't be that way. And, they're as healthy as they're going to be the rest of the season. They're not going to have Josh O, but they had Langston Love in this game. On the stat sheet, apparently Jeremy Roach did play. You'd be forgiven if you didn't notice that. But like, this is as healthy as you're going to be. To me, the excuses are kind of out the door. You're not going to be a top 10 team. We know that. They're probably not going to be a Final Four team or anything like that. But to just have this one in, one out for a couple weeks in a row, that just can't be acceptable.
And I get them being tired. Of course you're tired. You have such a short rotation, but that's not an excuse.
Arizona's got some big guys out too, by the way.
Yes.
V-Star's given his first start of his career in that game.
I remember before this game, one of my coworkers was asking me like, oh, do you think Baylor's got a chance in this? He was making a graphic for our social media. And I was like, they have a chance if they want to. Because
you saw that in the second half.
Yes, but you can't win games just on one half. You got to play the full thing, and you got to play with that grit. Norchad talked about it. Well, where was it at?
Yeah, he said what did he say? He's like, we played with it for a little bit, and then we needed a little bit more. Yeah, this team needs a little bit more in all facets. And like Scott was like, we get to the free throw line. 2 free throws, 2 free throws. And then we get to the line. 2 free throws, 2 free throws. And then we get to the line. 2 free throws, 2 free throws. And then we get to the line. 2 free throws, 2 free throws. And then we get to the line. 2 free throws, 2 free throws. And then we get to the line. 2 free throws, 2 free throws. And then we get to the line. 2 free throws, 2 free throws. And then we get to the line. 2 free throws, 2 free throws. And then we get to the line. 2 free throws, 2 free throws. And then we get to the line. 2 free throws, 2 free throws. And then we get to the line. 2 free throws, 2 free throws. And then we get to the line. 2 free throws, 2 free throws. And then we get to the line. 2 free throws, 2 free throws. And then we get to the line. 2 We need to shoot better at the free throw line, but we get there. They're an offensively challenged team, which the numbers still show that they're pretty good. But anyone who's watched this team the last 2.5 months would disagree. And they played defense for about half the game. I mean, they were really struggling down low in that first half, especially. So I want to see the bright spots for this team. I just can't right now.
I do too.
We can see it for the women's team though.
So bright.
Little bright spots here for the team and maybe for some individual awards. Why Nikki Collin has proven to be one of the best coaches in college basketball this year. That's coming up next on Locked On Baylor. Sydney Wicker joining as she does every Wednesday. Wicker Wednesdays here on Locked On Baylor. We talked about this last week, Sydney, kind of the way the team formerly known as the Lady Bears has flown under the radar. And that's through no fault of their own, really. I mean, they had a couple of games in non-con that they lost and they shouldn't have. But since that TCU game, they've been on fire. Like they don't lose now. And they're all of a sudden very much in this picture to win the Big 12. That last regular season game is against TCU at the Foster Pavilion. That is the chance to be a big-time night for this team and this program and specifically their coach, Nikki Collin, who has gotten – under some criticism, taking over for a Hall of Famer and Kim Mulkey is never easy, but I think for the most part, Baylor fans have been behind her. And now I found this a very interesting tweet yesterday from the Naismith Awards. The Naismith Awards itself, these are the people that give it out, Sydney, okay? Under the leadership of head coach Nikki Collin, Baylor's now ranked number 19, climbing up 6 spots, 22-5, tied for the best record in the Big 12, and a chance to win this conference. Will Nikki Collin make an appearance on maybe you can answer that question, Naismith Awards, not us, Naismith Women's College Coach of the Year watch list? They had high expectations coming in. They maybe floundered a little bit in the non-conference, but they're kind of right where we expected them to be preseason. So my question to you, Sydney Wicker, since you don't actually give out the award, should Nikki Collin be in consideration for the National Coach of the Year this year?
I definitely think in consideration.
I don't see why not.
I don't see why not either. I know a couple weeks ago, I can't remember who Baylor had just beat or who they lost to, but we were talking about the men versus the women. I was like, every time I'm sitting at a women's game, I'm always like, wow, this team is so fun. And they are, and they just they click. They have the grit. They have the pieces together. And they've just gotten unlucky or just haven't. I mean, UCLA was they're just such a good team. I wouldn't be
that one
want to win it all, but and then playing close with TCU like they did, and now they get to end the season with TCU, which is going to be so fun. I think she has done a remarkable job. I think the way that she leads her group is so fun to watch and to be a part of. I would love to see her at least, be in consideration for it. There's so many good coaches in women's basketball right now, so I get that it's tough, but she's making a difference, and you can see that on the court.
Let me throw it out this way to you, because this is what I initially thought of when I saw this tweet was, maybe we have been a little hard on Nikki Collin and the team the last couple of years, but if they made it to the Sweet 16 last year, if they do that again, or maybe an Elite 8, God forbid, knock on wood, a Final 4, that's a pretty big accomplishment in the short amount of time after losing a Hall of Fame coach. Let's just put that into perspective. That doesn't this would be what, 4 years since? If they were able to make a serious run within 4 years, within one class of players after losing Kim Mulkey, that's a big deal. You look at it from the women's game, what has Tennessee been since Pat Summitt retired? Or the men's game, which I more closely relate to, is Indiana, they're looking for another coach. They haven't had it right since Bobby Knight, really. I mean, Tom Crean had a good little run there, but they haven't had it right in 25 years. UCLA, it took them 20 years after John Wooden. North Carolina, they made a championship game with Hubert Davis, but they're going to miss the tournament. They're still trying to figure it out after Roy Williams. This doesn't just happen. Most schools don't just hop into the next one. And it's especially tough in women's basketball too, where you've seen such a concentration of power the last 40 years, which there's more parity in the game than ever, which is great. But like, again, Tennessee, Old Dominion was a power 40 years ago. Kim Mulkey's alma mater, Louisiana Tech. What have they done since Sonia Hogue? It doesn't just happen right away. That's why it's so tough to replace a Hall of Fame coach. And so again, I lay it out of if they win the Big 12 this year, that's 2 conference championships since Kim Mulkey left, a conference with some pretty good powerhouses in there. I think that alone should have her in consideration of, man, she had not been a head coach in college before. She came in from the pro game, replaced Kim Mulkey, who was, the only successful head coach in Baylor women's basketball history. And here they are, kind of not exactly picking up where they left off with national championships, but in the mix. I think that's important, right?
So important. It's so hard because I think women's basketball alone has just grown tremendously. Like, South Carolina is not the only powerhouse. They will always be a powerhouse as long as Dawn is there. But like the fact that, you've got teams like UCLA, USC, like so many good teams that people like Iowa and Caitlin Clark really changed the way that we look at women's basketball. And I think what Nikki Collin has done is incredible. She's come in, you'd mentioned all the things that she's done. The fact that they're still sitting at the top of the Big 12 standings with the chance to like make a really good run in the tournament and everything that you had listed. I just think we'd be remiss not to mention it. And I don't understand. Like, I know there was like a little hesitation and people have like mentioned like, oh, I don't know about Coach. Why? What has she done that's not been good? I mean,
let her study up, man. Get
Yeah,
used to it.
like,
Get to know her.
Replacing somebody like Kim Mulkey is so hard to do. But look at what Kim Mulkey has. She won 1 national championship
She
since
did win a
left?
national championship. Yeah, she did win a national championship.
Yeah, but still, like that's tough to compete with and to replace.
Yeah. So I think that alone should get Nikki Collins some consideration. And when the Bears win the Big 12 championship, that'll help too. When they beat TCU in the grudge match,
positivity talk,
and then go to the Final Four, certainly she should be in that conversation. Sydney, how can people get involved in your conversation? That was the best segue I could come up with. How can people find your work? I know you're real busy today and the rest of this week, all around the ballparks and such. How can people keep up?
They can keep up by downloading the KCN 6 Plus app, which is also how you can hear the Locked On Baylor podcast or any of the Locked On podcast, which is awesome. And then you also can see any exclusive content that we're working on. I know we're working on a couple things here. And then once the Baylor women's basketball team makes a deep run in the playoffs, obviously we'll have so many amazing things on our app there. So all you have to do is download that. It's available on your Fire TV, Roku, or Apple TV. And then, of course, on your phone if you want to download it.
That's where I keep up. Sydney's with us every Wednesday, and in between, she is doing the Lord's work covering Baylor and all our local teams. Sydney, thank you so much. We will have you on next Wednesday for another Wicker Wednesday. Of course, you guys know the drill. Like and subscribe. It helps out the channel a ton. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Should Nikki Collin be the National Coach of the Year? What do you think of this new playoff expansion format and what it does for the SEC and the Big Ten, and more importantly, what it doesn't do for all of us? Let me know down in the comments below, and we will see you tomorrow on your favorite show. Thank you for making it your first listen today and every day. It's Locked On Baylor.